Today we are going to be background building for our next Jack and Annie story. We are moving on to a new ecosystem. It is called the Prairie Ecosystem. Prairie ecosystems are enormous areas of grass with very few trees. So it's just a bunch of grass and not a lot of trees. This ecosystem looks very different from some of the ones that we learned about. We learned about the Ice Age, we learned about the rainforest, the desert. So this ecosystem looks very different than some of the other ecosystems we have talked about. The terrain of a prairie is usually flat, though some prairies have hilly or rocky areas. So as you can see in the picture, you can see some rocks, you see a little bit of grass, it looks like it's bumpy. There is a large prairie ecosystem in the middle of the United States called the Great Plains. So that's where we live in the United States. So right in the middle, there are the Great Plains. We're going to talk all about the Great Plains. This is cool because all of the other ecosystems were not where we live, and this one is where we live. There are 4 seasons in the prairie ecosystem: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Just like where we live, summer on the prairie is super hot, and the winters are super cold, just like they are for us. In ecosystems, different kinds of plants grow depending on the amount of rain there. We know that we need rain and sun for plants to grow. So prairies get more rain than the desert, but less rain than the rainforest. Our desert is super dry, it doesn't get any rain, and that's why there aren't many plants. The prairie gets a little bit more, so that's why you have some grasses here, not a lot of trees. And the rainforest gets lots of rain, and that's why there are huge trees and lots of plants. There aren't many trees in a prairie ecosystem. Without trees to slow the wind, prairies can be very windy. And high, fast-moving winds make the weather change quickly. So prairies often have strong or unexpected storms. When warm and cool winds come together in an area, powerful windstorms called tornadoes can form. That's what you see here. That's a tornado. The American prairie is called Tornado Alley because it sees about 700 tornadoes each year. That's a lot of tornadoes, and I don't think it's very safe. Prairie plants have adapted to survive the intense weather. Grasses are shaped in a way that helps them survive the strong winds. The thin leaves, called blades, bend with the wind. They can get blown by fierce winds without getting damaged. Many insects like grasshoppers and wolf spiders live under the prairie grass and other plants. This area is protected from the harsh wind, rain, and snow, so it stays drier and warmer than the grass above. Animals on the prairie need shelter from the winds, sudden storms, and freezing winters. Some animals, such as rabbits and ground birds, find shelter underground in small holes. Other animals, like this prairie dog, they dig underground tunnels called burrows to protect themselves from the storms and the winds. That's pretty cool. Many prairie animals hibernate in the winter. They shelter in a safe place, often underground, for a long sleep. Hibernating animals use less energy so they can go long periods of time without eating or drinking. So these animals, they go underground and they stay sleeping for the entire winter. And then they come back out when the winter is over. During the cold prairie winters, the wolf spider stays warm under a blanket of old leaves. So this spider, he just hangs out underneath all of these leaves for the whole winter. It also has an extra trick for keeping warm. This spider can make a chemical that stops their blood in their body from freezing. Here's our bison. Many large prairie mammals like bison cope with the changing weather by growing different coats of fur in the winter and the summer. So in the winter, they have to have more fur to keep them warm. And in the spring, they shed that thick fur and then they have a coat of shorter, thinner fur because it's really hot and they don't need all of that fur to keep them warm. Some prairie animals live on the prairie only part of the time. During the winter, some birds migrate south to warmer places. So migrate means they just leave. They leave because it's too cold, so they go somewhere that's warm. In the spring, they come back and lay eggs and raise their babies. These birds are called a crane, and this one down here is a swan. Humans also live on the prairie. Prairie soil is full of nutrients, so it's good for farming. Today, much of the American prairie has been turned into farmland where people grow wheat. People grind the wheat seeds into flour, which can be baked into bread and other food. And we've talked about this with the nights and the whole process of making bread. People also grow corn and raise cows for milk and meat. Let's do our words. I'm going to count syllables. Grass, grass. Prairie, prairie. Farm, farm. Spider, spider. Prairie dog, prairie dog. Cow, cow. Tornado, tornado. Bison, bison. Crane, crane. All right, when you're writing your message today, think about one thing that you learned about the prairie. I learned about anything that you learned about.